What's up, guys? Mr. Nose Hoops back today with another video, and today's video is not brought to you by a sponsor, but this video is happening because of Levi's the best saying, and I quote, in the last video, "We need more Knicks videos." Not gonna lie. Well, Levi, you got your video. And this, I guess, is partly to show you guys, if you leave a comment with an idea of what you want to see next, I'm always open to it. So today we are talking about how good are the New York Knicks really in the grand scheme of the Eastern Conference and just the NBA as a whole. Since getting rid or losing Isaiah Hartenstein, acquiring Mikal Bridges, and re-signing OG Anunoby. Let's get right into it. Obviously, the first thing we're going to talk about, Jalen Brunson. Brunson is going to be the best player on this team. He determines how far they go. If he has a playoff series where they're stinky, and it could be because he's playing terribly. Now, what we're going to see here, and what we're probably going to see a lot of, now replace this with Mitchell Robinson, obviously, the PNR action, pick and roll actions. Here, Josh Hart slips, gets Porzingis, Brown is stuck at his back, right? You're going to see a lot of these actions against teams with a better, quite frankly, just a better big than the Knicks, trying to get those bigs to then get away from the rim and to allow Brunson and Randle and these other guys to get in, right? Even here, Brunson, now this time with Mitch, right, gets that PNR. Mitch is a really good screener, starts to roll, catches Porzingis, on the back foot, and gets a tough bucket. And I think the big thing is for this team is going to be defense, right? Even in this situation. Transition. Derek White gets caught on the handle. That's a tough three ball, right? And again, I think before we even proceed any further, this needs to be said. This is the year where Brunson truly has expectations. I think last year, people looked at the Knicks and they were like, they could be okay, right? Because they had just lost to the they had just beaten the Cavs, but then got spanked by the Heat, who were struggling without Jimmy, or with an injured Jimmy, right? So then it was like, okay, how good are you really, right? Then, last year, I will give benefit here to some extent, they got very, 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 very dinged up going into and even in the playoffs against the Indiana Pacers. But this is the year for Brunson. Expectations are high. And the view of Brunson in the NBA community is only getting higher and higher. Well, what I call for, I guess, or what I advise NBA fans to do then, if the view of this player is getting so much higher, like he's escalating for a lot of people, and for the most part, understandably so, well, you got to hold him in that caliber of player. And what I mean by that is, if you guys watch the first round against the Sixers, the first two games, they won in spite of Jalen Brunson. He was playing atrocious, terrible. I couldn't even describe just how poorly he was playing. But because he wasn't viewed again at that tier, and he wasn't putting up some of the bombs he was putting up, you gotta let it slide. Well, if he's someone that for you could be inching into the top 20, top 15, you gotta hold him to that caliber. And again, proceeding on, OG Anunoby, I think, is not the second most important, but I think he's the most important defensive piece. Right? Even here, just watching him navigate over and around screens is going to be huge. Right? Forces Mikal to get rid of the ball. Right? Watford goes for the pass. OG cuts it off. Right? That's just a bad pass. But again, that's how the Knicks defense is going to have to play. They have to suffocate you offensively to make sure that you cannot get comfortable. Right? Right, DiVincenzo, solid defender. I would go on my way to say great. Does a great job navigating. And this is just, moments like this is why pick and roll against this team is going to be tough if you're not an elite ball handler, right? OG just comes over and he's like, no, you're picking up this dribble, gets it out of the way, transition dunk, right? you're going to see a lot of transition with this team. And even here against Giannis, right? Kicks the ball out to Brook. Brook pumps, goes over. And again, OG's, that's the thing I think Tibbs is going to love about OG with the full season. OG, especially now that he's actually on a winning team, a good team, OG loves to give those effort steals, those effort defensive plays, which is huge. Obviously, what he gives you offensively, I think, is really good in terms of, like, he's a great floor spacer. Doesn't necessarily do the best with the ball in his hands. And that is a negative. And at the very end of the video, we're going to kind of get into the overall positives, overall negatives, and how good I think they really can be. I think, realistically, right, OG is going to be huge for the team, because if he's out, you're putting a lot of defense, like, ultimately the defensive pressure is Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby. And the second those two either get hurt or do not perform up to expectations, I think this team could be severely underwhelming. Right? And then Randle coming back is going to be huge. Right? Because now you have another guy who can actually create in isolation. Is he the best? I wouldn't say that. But he's able to. Right? Comparatively to Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby, I'm taking Julius Randle as an isolation scorer. Right? Even creating the foul here. Rim pressure is going to be huge on this team, because Mitchell Robinson offensively is not that good. So now you're going to need to apply more rim pressure, and that's what Randle should be doing. Like, he's a solid three-point shooter, but I think you should be seeing his three-pointers go down in favor of going to attack the rim, getting to the midi, right? And now, even here, right, great cut here by Randle, right? Creating the open shot for himself, getting Jeff Green, right? And again, this is how they got to attack, because to some extent, they don't necessarily have the greatest three-point shooters. Boom, right? Even here, right? Like, taking advantage of your size in situations where they don't have, necessarily the bigs available is going to be important. And that's why I think Randle is more, not an X factor, but an underrated, like, piece of this team. Not in terms of, like, how good he is or isn't. His offensive game and its translation in the playoffs is going to also determine how well this team performs. Because I think if he's struggling, Brunson is not only having to create for himself, but basically everybody else. Most of these dudes are not self-creators, not good enough self-creators at least. And at that point, I don't know how good Brunson is going to be at that. I think he's a good passer, a good playmaker, but I wouldn't go out of my way to say he's great at either. And I wouldn't go out of my way to say that I am fully confident that he is going to consistently, night in, night out, just create for that team in the playoffs if Randle is stinking offensively in terms of creating for himself. And then their biggest issue to me is their bigs. And you're in, I would say, the much worse conference to be in terms of having a question at your big. The only reason I say that is, right, if you paired them up against a team like OKC last year, I wouldn't be as concerned. I'd be like, okay, yeah, Mitchell Robinson, Chet's not that good of a rebounder. You're cool. But in this situation, Embiid, Giannis, those two alone, right? Like, those two bigs that you are more than likely to run into in the second round, that's going to be an issue. Like, that is not going to be good. So to me, and even with Boston at times, the way when Porzingis sometimes gets attacking, if Tatum rolls to the rim, Brown, right? I don't think they necessarily have the best rim protection / rim pressure in the world. That I think is going to make it a huge disadvantage for them going up against some of these teams. Right? Like, even if you look here, like, look at this lineup. Now, obviously, Taj Gibson is not on this team anymore, but if this is Precious Achiuwa, it's not changing my opinion. Like, at a certain point, even if you go up against someone like Shea, right, De'Aaron Fox, like, these guys are going to be able to go to the rim whenever they feel like it, or attack towards the rim, right? Hartenstein stuck. Now it's just Brunson. Now that's the other thing. As much as they can kind of switch everything around and try and hide Brunson, I still think that's going to be a major question, I guess. Even here, right? They get Embiid, gets it over. And at this point, this is with Hartenstein, right? And even then, Embiid's having his way with him in terms of like pause, first of all, but in terms of how he attacks. And even here with Maxey, right? Comes over, gets the screen from B-Ball Paul, attacks, rolls. There ain't no one there, right? And that I think is going to be a big issue. I think when you run into teams like Milwaukee or Philly, possibly in the second round, and they have a player that loves to attack the rim or force your big into a tough situation, that is something I think is going to be like really difficult. And to be honest, I think that's going to show how good this team can be. In terms of, obviously, I think Mikal Bridges is going to be good on this team, right? I think OG is going to be good on this team. But it depends, I guess, on like 2 to 3 major factors. How good is Jalen Brunson really? Now that the expectations are there, now that the team is expected to be good, or great even, how well does he really do? Then you have the question of, how much does rim protection really matter? Because to me, outside of Mitchell Robinson, they don't really have any. And offensively, their big play offensively is not very good. So then you have an issue similar to when Boston in 2022 had Robert Williams and Al Horford. Now, Al Horford could shoot, but when Robert Williams would go to roll, teams would kind of be like, bro, if it ain't an alley and it ain't just like a one dunk down, going to dunk again, I ain't trusting them. Right? So you kind of have that issue. I think this Knicks team is probably, if I take into account the possibility of injuries and such, I think they're probably the third best team in the East. I think Giannis just gives such a problem to this team. Now, again, the question is, can they defend the perimeter players of the Bucks better? Most likely. But it also depends on how well they hide Jalen Brunson. I think, obviously, Boston is better than them. But they can try and out-Boston Boston. The issue is they don't have a Porzingis. They don't have a big that's good enough. Philly, if they're healthy, I think Philly's the better team because, again, you got Maxey, Paul George, and Embiid, which is going to be hard to defend. But the question is if they're healthy. And that's a hard if. I think this team is really good, for sure. I think, though, we have them etched in to do certain things that I feel like we have to see it to believe it. With this team specifically. Same thing with Philly, to be honest. Like, before anyone goes, oh, but what about Philly? After they haven't gotten to the I agree. That's another team that I got to see it to believe it. You could even say it with the Bucks. I got to see it to believe it. The difference is, to me, is with the Bucks, you got Giannis. With the Sixers, you have Embiid. Like, these are two players that, regardless if they're hurt, whatever, their impact is like just almost uncomparable to a lot of players in the league. So the question is, how good are the New York Knicks? I think they're really good. I just don't know if they're great. I need to see it in action. 82 games, playoffs. I need to see it. So let me know what you guys think down below. Are the New York Knicks a team to beat in the East? Are they that good? Do you think that they're better than the Sixers? Do you think they're better than the Bucks? Are they beating anyone in the West if they got into the finals? Let me know what you guys think down below. This was Answer Knows Hoops. Again, shout out to you, Levi, for, I guess, basically recommending this video. And let me know what you guys think down below. Leave a like, comment, subscribe. Have a great rest of your day, guys. Peace out.